So I got a PSVR 2 and I'm just going to talk about it. Now, I was a PSVR 1 user, and at the time I thought it was cool, but if I'm being honest, especially with the power of hindsight, the thing was kind of crappy. Like, mainly the motion controls. Like, who had the great idea to use the PS3 era move controllers, camera with those flashing lights? I hope they got fired. They didn't track well at all, and the controls for games like Skyrim were just genuinely quite awful. Like, if you got around the learning curve of them, it was kind of fine, but still, the tracking was atrocious if you played for any length of time. But here we are now, 2024, and I finally got my hands on a PlayStation VR 2. And honestly, it is just such a major improvement. One major issue I had with the original and the Quest 2 is motion sickness. It took me weeks with the original PSVR and then the Quest 2 to kind of get over motion sickness. And I haven't touched my VR headsets for the Oculus or the original PSVR in a couple of years. Not since, I think, Medal of Honor released on the Quest 2. So I was a little worried going into the PlayStation VR 2 thinking, oh my god, I'm going to have to readjust to VR. It's going to take me a couple of weeks before I can really dive into games because I was worried about the motion sickness. And to my utter shock and surprise, putting the headset on, I had no motion sickness whatsoever. I had no headaches. I was able to just play the games and enjoy them. The only thing that stopped me was the controllers dying. But, you know, the most important thing is obviously the games, and the games have never looked better in VR. Playing games like Resident Evil 4 was just insane. Just walking around felt amazing. And the haptics in this thing, not just the controllers, which are great, but also the headset. Like, when this happened, like, I felt it. I could feel the vibrations in the headset. It was just so amazing and immersive. And just the combination of just the visuals and the haptic feedback create such an immersive experience. Like in Kayak VR, you can see this right now and it looks amazing, but you can almost feel your paddle going through the water with the haptics. It's really impressive. And just the way that the HDR can enhance the lighting, like playing Resident Evil 4 and just looking at the fires, it was so interesting. And at least from what I've played, the PSVR 2 does have some amazing games. Like Resident Evil 4, Village. Thankfully, the guys behind Walking Dead, Saints and Sinners are super dope because that was just a free upgrade and I didn't have to buy it again to play it on the PS5. And you cannot convince me that the PSVR 2 version is not the best version of Walking Dead, Saints and Sinners. That thing is fantastic. And one thing I love is playing sports games, especially in VR. And I've been playing this tennis game and oh my god, it has got me raging a few times. And I also tried out the demo for the football game, the NFL one. I can't remember the name. But that game was actually a lot better than I thought it would be. And you know, I'm on the internet, I'm like following all the gaming news, and I know that there's a lot of doubts about PlayStation VR 2 and its future, but it feels like all these YouTubers and journalists kind of want it to fail. But it's an amazing piece of technology and by far the best virtual reality experience that I've ever had, and I've barely scratched the surface of like the games available. I mean, yeah, to be honest, looking at the store, there does seem to be a lot of shovelware, glorified tech demos, but that's kind of how it seems to be with VR, unfortunately. But when I saw that the PSVR 2 was on sale, and I just knew, as a massive Resident Evil fan, I had to play 4 Remake and Village in VR. Like, there was no doubt in my mind that I had to get the PSVR 2 eventually just to play those in VR. Because in my opinion, best VR game I've ever played, Resident Evil 4 on the Quest 2, and now playing 4 Remake, I'm like, oh my god, it's so good. You know, it just makes me so happy that you can experience the game that way, and it's so fantastic. And I wish that's something that devs would do more of, is just, you know, focus on creating like an amazing flat game and then you port it to VR. You know, too many games that are made for VR like are great little experiences, but they're so short, they're not like full games. Like, I'm sure it says something about VR that, in my opinion, the best VR games are ports of traditional flat games. And I've never played Half-Life Alyx, I know that one's amazing, but from what I've played, those are the best VR games, are ones that are normal games that get ported into VR. I'd love a native version of Skyrim on PSVR 2. I know that probably wouldn't happen. I think Bethesda's VR studio got shut down when they went over to Xbox. But I'm hoping the PC support coming soon really turns out great, because I can't wait to kind of hook up my PSVR 2 to my PC and hope that Skyrim runs relatively well, because I find the PSVR 2 headset so much more comfortable than my Quest. But I'm guessing, you know, most of us didn't buy a PlayStation VR 2 to play PC games. We got it to play on PlayStation and the simplicity that comes along with that. And without mods or special stuff on the PSVR 2 on its own, it's pretty amazing. While being admittedly expensive, but when you play it, it feels fantastic, and it's the best VR experience that I've ever had, and I don't know, I would recommend getting one if you can. If you have a favorite VR game, let me know down below.